Dr. Faulkner. Mr. Garman.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mr. Reichert.
Here.
Mr. Reichert Jr.
Here.
Mr. Umbriak. Dr. Green.
Here. 2-1, public comment, max of 3 minutes, agenda items only. Seeing as how the press is the only one that's here, we'll move on from that. 3-1, beginning of the year, norm reference data.
Thank you. I'll turn that over to Mr. Moser.
Yeah, so just as an update for the board, for the community at large, if we can go to the next slide, Mr. Ryan, the beginning of the year, next slide actually, we do make sure that we go out and get a good sound foundation of information, of data on where our students are at the beginning of the year, specifically in K through 8, the norm referenced assessment. So just a rundown and where we're at on those and what's coming up next month. So in grades 1 and 2, we've seen already substantial completion of the MAP growth assessment in reading, and we're currently in the midst of iReady math diagnostics in grades 1 and 2. And coming up after that, students will complete MAP fluency in the near future, which the MAP growth measures specifically more in-depth reading comprehension skills and touches on some early literacy skills, but the MAP fluency really gives a rounded out picture of the actual early foundational literacy skills. So we get a clear picture of where all of our students are at in the reading process, not only in the ability to actually read the text, but then also in understanding the text. Kindergarten, we do not start the year, as you might imagine, we do not start the year with kindergartners completing assessments because, quite frankly, that would be a monumental task for our teachers. So we do wait several weeks in. The plan for that is for those students to complete only MAP fluency in November and then complete the iReady math diagnostic in January. In 3 through 8, we also already have substantial completion of MAP growth in both reading and math. So we now have kind of a starting point of where students are at. We can work with administrators, teachers, and students to set growth goals throughout the course of the year that then we measure halfway through the year and then again at the end of the year. So it really kind of helps chart our instructional planning in every classroom in reading and math for the year. And then one thing is, since we do not have a complete picture yet, the beginning of the year data will be shared at the next committee of the whole meeting. So you will actually see where our students are in national percentiles across grades 1 and 2 at that point in time in both reading and math. Go to the next slide. An update on federal programs. We have submitted the consolidated application for title services at this point in time. It is still under review, but we're seeking approval, and just wanted to inform the board of what the planned uses are for those federal monies that come in, and this kind of outlines specifically exactly where and how we're using those funds, or at least our intent for Title I. You see there's a total of $429,555. That is the public share allotment, and we plan on using that, as Danville has in the past and as most school districts honestly do throughout the state, to offset the cost of salaries and benefits, specifically at DPS, because DPS is actually our only Title I school. We can pay for about 88% of 5 reading specialists in both salaries and benefits at the primary school. For Title II, the planned use of our allotment of $64,430 is used to help offset costs under the classroom size reduction it should be for a second grade teacher, which is our largest, by far our largest class in the primary level. I think there's about 180 students right now in second grade. For Title III is around English language learners specifically. We do not have a high population of English language learning students when compared to a lot of schools in the state, so our allotment is actually very low. In fact, for many years until just a few years ago, most schools in this region got nothing because we didn't meet a threshold. Now we have an option where we get a minimal amount of money from the federal government for this, and we have the option of buying into a consortium so that there's a little bit more power in the buying of services. If we don't buy into that consortium, we actually don't receive the funds. So it's kind of a no-brainer to just join the consortium with other schools. So what happens is here, our consortium is run through the CSIU. And what it allows for is we can get professional development, reimbursement for conferences, and some specific trainings around ELL with no additional costs in the future by buying into that consortium. So we plan, the way it is written is we will actually join that consortium. Like I said, otherwise we would not receive that funding at all. Title IV, planned use of $8,986 towards a mental health specialist, salaries and benefits. There is a necessary percentage which needs to be spent on healthy and supportive measures taken in schools. With our addition of a fifth mental health specialist, this is a good use of that money and would be able to be used this way in the future. And then you see $3,263 planned towards instructional software costs. Again, there is a necessary effective use of technology expenditure in the grant. So a certain percentage of the total allotment has to go to some sort of effective use of technology. And then a planned use of $20,000 towards startup costs for $10,000 each for a middle school agriculture and a family and consumer science course, which are relatively new and revised in the case of FCS. That is revised this year at the middle school level. And this would fall under the necessary well-rounded education expenditures. The nice thing about this is those courses, while they certainly will have supply budgets in future years, their highest need will be this year, the first year, when you actually have to buy some equipment. Not only like in an ag class, you're going to buy soil and seeds and things of that nature every year, but you don't necessarily need to buy all of the equipment every year. That's what this money will sort of be dedicated for those well-rounded opportunities. In the case of agriculture, we're really excited about that course, which is brand new at the middle school level this year, being taught by Dina Lewis. And the reality is we have a fantastic ag program at the high school, and what we really want to do is kind of create a very seamless transition for kids to get some experience and understand what that program might be prior to entering the high school halls. So if they take that course, if they have a level of interest at the middle school level, they'll kind of know what they're getting into. And the three, our two ag teachers at the high school, Mr. Wagner and Mr. Schultz, have been working with Ms. Lewis very well in terms of creating that course so that it really does start to serve as a feeder program. And then one that's still out there, we're still waiting on the release by PDE, is the Ready to Learn block grant. That one we will plan to continue to help support costs of full-day kindergarten, as many schools use that funding as well. That's how it has historically been used here, and we would plan to continue that. Any questions about federal programming?
All right. We'll transition to finance. And our first item within finance, if you take us to the next slide, is I did share this via email with board members, but wanted to address it because there's been a positive update. So the VOTEC shared that they were having two building issues that had a pretty substantial cost. One was an issue with the sewage line, and one was an issue with field house floor damage. And so the sewage line repairs were slated to cost $90,621, with the field house floor anticipated to cost $87,202, for a total of $177,823. If you move to the next slide, Mr. Ryan, you'll see that one of the things they did was go to the JOC. Tyler, thank you for your service on the JOC. As one of the options would be to say, should the districts give them funding and vote on giving them funding towards that project. Luckily, the JOC had some discussion and they landed on another solution for funding. So if you go to the next screen, you'll see that right now the VOTEC did repair the sewage line because that was like an immediate repair need, but they've applied for a grant to cover the cost of those repairs. and they've decided to put the repair of the field house on hold at this point. It does, my best understanding is it does affect where their wrestling program practices, and so they're looking at some alternative locations for that. They can still hold wrestling meets in their gym. So no cost to Danville at this point in time.
Okay. So these are things they sent us, is the way they're doing it. Are they asking us, because we do have students there, how we would like to address this as districts? Are they telling us this is what we're doing?
So the JOC was voted on. We send,
I understand.
board
Yes.
representation there. So my best understanding is they felt like the JOC and leadership there felt like sewage line was an immediate repair, like the school
Yes.
has to function.
Yes,
And
I agree.
field house, it sounds like there's a lot of discussion that districts don't want to pay, and so they've paused and are having more discussion as a JOC right now.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion never happened here that I know of. And
Well,
it seems like a lot of things are coming at us that we've never talked about. And I think we should play a part in that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ty.
The last meeting they talked about, they had three options. Basically, they gave three options of them taking a loan for it.
Right.
They looked into those options, asking the districts. And as far as the wrestling goes, I guess the superintendent at Central, they worked something out with him to let them use the facility. But their field house they use for phys ed too and health classes. So that was more of their concern than the wrestling side of things. I mean, the way I took it. But
Yeah, no, I understand.
didn't like put anything in stone. They just talked about it last time, and
Okay, good.
there was a lot of pushback. I was kind of quiet, but there was a lot of pushback with the districts paying anything. So I just kind of sat there and listened.
Yeah, no, I understand. We all send kids there. I appreciate
Yeah.
the fact that people drive up there. It's not an easy thing to do sometimes in the middle of the week. I just think that we should have a position at each district as opposed to, it just sounds like there are kids up there that are our kids for the $90,000 in the field house that are being put in positions they shouldn't be put in. And would we do that with our kids or not? Probably not. Our kids here. But they're our kids too, and I think we should philosophically be in the same place about what we fund and what we don't. I'm of the position that we probably should be looking more seriously about funding the field house as well, our portion of it. But the other question I wanted to ask is, you had a percentage up there, and it fell under capital project. There's two ways that they allocate funds out of the school districts. The first formula they use is for your yearly budget, and in that one, Berwick pays the highest number because they have the most kids. The capital projects would be done based upon the market value, I believe, of your properties in the district, where Danville pays the most. I don't know that this qualifies as a capital project to me. This should be a discussion as well, as how you're going to fund this and how it's going to be allocated. And it's not comfortable for me to be in that position because I worked for Berwick for 13 years. But it just seems like, did they not anticipate this happening? And did they not put it in their yearly budget? And now they're coming to us?
My understanding, and again, I'm kind of newer to this information, as is JOC. I think in the last 2 weeks we've both gotten some information. My best understanding was that both of these things were not things they anticipated because they just did all of the major repairs to the building, and this was not part of those building projects.
That was kind of part 3 about what I was going to say. Didn't they just do a major project
They did,
there?
yes. They're still, their actual ribbon cutting is this Saturday, I
Oh,
believe. So
all right.
yes, that's how fresh the building project is.
Okay. All right. So I guess Ty answered one of the questions, is that the people there had talked about it, and a lot of the districts were opposed to having to pay for this. I just always think we should formulate a position type of thing. That's my belief. I think that sometimes they operate as an independent entity up there, and they've been doing that for a long time.
And then the next item within finance is an update for earned income tax. So we have 3 quarters of the 23-24 fiscal year in, and so you'll see our current collection rate at $6,432,426. So we're missing a quarter, so we don't have that yet. We initially projected revenue prior to 23-24 of 8.3 million. And so we feel very confident we'll hit that, because if we came in even less than the other 3 quarters had, we would still hit that. And just, we'll bring that back to you in October to let you know where we actually land, but this also shows you where we've actually been over the last few years. So we feel like this is certainly positive news for us in terms of the 23-24 budget.
I just want to add that, you know, when you look at the projection of the 24-25, because one of the challenges that school districts have is we have to try to project what this revenue is going to be in the next fiscal year. And you can see we had to make that projection back in
Before we knew.
before we even had the third one in the third quarter from the previous fiscal year in. So once we know what our actual complete is for 23-24 fiscal year, we'll be able to eyeball our projection of 8.8 million to see how accurate we feel like that's going to be now.
That then takes us to athletics and extracurriculars. And our first item here is a Hall of Fame update, and I'll turn that to Mr. Moser, who held that meeting.
Yeah, just briefly, we were able to hold our first Hall of Fame committee meeting on Sunday, August 18th. It was a productive meeting. We unfortunately did not have a quorum there, so we couldn't actually conduct any official votes on anything. We were one person shy, quite frankly. There was some people moving their own children into college that weekend, so fair that they were not there. But it was a great start of conversation. The next meeting is scheduled for Sunday, September 15th. Just as sort of a heads up to the board here, you know, as they work through their initial meetings, there may be some, you know, amendments to the bylaws to help them procedurally that we would come back and ask you to approve. We would explain exactly why that is happening and why they're asking for those amendment changes. One of them would be like initial number of inductees in the first year or two in order to make sure that we're doing the best we can to honor people from the past, things of that nature. But I know there was some really healthy, productive conversation at the first meeting, and looking forward to that follow-up meeting coming next weekend.
How many people are on that committee? Is there openings still? Are we still
7, there is still one
one
opening.
So-
Yes.
And our next item in athletics is just wanted to share that we have started the fall season, and just want to thank our coaches and student athletes. We're off to a great start. I'd like to shout out our girls volleyball team. They're just in year 2 of being a varsity sport, and they've started the season 2-1 for varsity and 3-0 for JV. So a huge improvement from last year. They did tons of work over the summer, lots of clinics throughout the school year. So we have some young ladies really committed to the sport of volleyball. Shout out to our middle school and high school cross country teams, both boys and girls. They are all 4-0 to start the season. And certainly kudos to our football team, who's 2-0 and ranked first in the state of Pennsylvania right now. Very exciting, and would hope people would come to our first home game this Friday night. But fall sports are well underway. All of the schedules are on our website under athletics, and just encourage folks to come out and cheer our student athletes on.
Can I ask you a question? You had mentioned our middle school cross-country team and then our varsity volleyball team.
Yes.
Is it typical for volleyball programs in this region to have middle school feeder programs or not? I don't even know whether they do or not. I'm just curious. Is that something
I
we
don't
should be
know the
considering?
answer to that, but I'd be happy to find out more information. I've not heard anything about middle school volleyball, but
Okay. I know
Mr.
our-
Albertson, would you have any?
Not a lot. But having a middle school program could help you to actually get enough for JV. That's
For
how you
sure,
end up
yeah.
with numbers, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have enough. Central just started. They have enough.
Yeah,
Small, but that's the across the board for JVs right now.
right.
I would anticipate that certainly that number growing just as the number of varsity programs are growing in the region over the next couple of years.
Certainly keep an eye on that.
Could we get a report on how many districts actually have a program
Yep.
Yep.
at
I've
the
made
middle
a
school
note.
level? Or it might
Absolutely.
be called a junior high program, just to see how many do and don't, because I do know that we started the discussions about volleyball, we got like a laundry list of reasons why we couldn't do it. And none of them really were reasons not to, and when we did do it, we had 80 to 90 students sign up. We've had great participation, it's developing, and we have a middle school cross-country program, we have a middle school football program. I can go right down the line how many. I would hope that we would at least take a look at it.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
On that same note, I know a while back we did a survey on middle school softball. Did that ever, do we know what?
I don't know the answer to that offhand. Mr. Albertson, I don't know if you have the results from the middle school softball survey.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there only like 2 schools that don't have middle school softball? Yeah.
That would be on the PIAA website, I believe. All you have to do is go into the PIAA and look through the website.
Yeah.
and find
Yeah,
the
to find out
programs
who they have. I
Who
think
has
he had surveyed our girls to get that number of interest
there.
too.
But who has them?
Yes.
The middle school, that would be similar to the volleyball, that if you have a lot of other schools, it makes it an easier discussion.
Easier to schedule.
If there aren't
and-
that many, I mean, you have to have somebody to play. If there's only one other school or
Yeah.
2 other schools, it could be difficult if they're not close. Okay, thank you.
That takes us to buildings and grounds. Our first item is just a follow-up from tennis courts. So you have a copy of the RFP in your folders if you'd like to take a look at that. It's complete and is being posted this week after we have discussion today. It does include the option of companies submitting proposals for either the high school or the middle school or both. And it provides an option to view pricing for the middle school for alternative court surfaces. In research, we've discovered there's some other surfaces that can be used for recreational purposes on a tennis or pickleball court that might be good options for the middle school. We've also been working with Borough Council, and the borough's property committee will be recommending to Borough Council next week that they terminate the lease agreement with us and give us control of the middle school tennis courts. So then we can move forward with this project and anything else that we would do with the courts without their approval. And they were very positive about that. So we'll see how that discussion goes on Tuesday night. And Mr. Moser can provide us with an update about storage sheds.
Sure. Yeah, we are currently securing quotes in order to explore the purchase of 2 different storage sheds for athletics. One would serve as a replacement of the shed currently used for track and field. That one has significant water damage, honestly in poor condition, needs a new roof, needs new sides. It's not really salvageable in any way, shape, or form. The second is for use at the baseball field. It would provide a storage place for larger equipment, things like the L screens, tarps, and machinery that's commonly used for the maintenance of the fields during the off season, especially during those winter months when a lot of damage can accrue. And during the season, it could also be, what we're doing is looking at one that could be multifunctional. There was a request for, some sort of area for a concession stand. So what we are looking for is one that not only would have the space, same size as the track and field shed, but also have a side window, kind of a sliding glass, as well as a man door on one of the ends so you can get things in and out, both during the season and during the off season. We have some quotes at this point in time already in. It's around $14,000 of cost, so we feel like we can pay for this out of the budget. As already passed, we wouldn't be coming to you asking for anything more beyond that. But a good investment for making sure that we protect things that cost a lot of money that get replaced on every few years. So you can lengthen the life of some of that stuff, some of those things that would be stored in there. These are a sound investment, we feel, for the district itself. Any questions or concerns about those?
The only thing I would add is if you're considering storage sheds, is to consider the roof, because the roof is what really adds to longevity. So if you go with a steel roof, you're going to have a shed for many, many years. If you go with a shingle roof, you're going to have to replace it.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, one of the reasons why the purchase of two is around $14,000 instead of cheaper is because that was one of our requirements, was to have a steel roof on there so that we didn't have to replace that in a couple of years.
That takes us to long-range planning. If you go to the next slide, we have just a brief Alloy 5 update. We'll get a large update next month. We continue to hold meetings with Alloy 5 every other Wednesday. At this point in time, they have conducted site visits to all buildings and grounds. So toured athletic facilities, buildings, roofs, parking lots, all of those things kind of touch down in all parts of the district. They have met with building principals. They have met with special education, athletics, transportation, and food service departments to discuss the functionality of the buildings and grounds for each of those departments. They're currently finalizing assessments, or what they'll even call report cards, of all of our buildings and grounds, and they are finalizing their enrollment study. They are planning a midpoint presentation that includes an enrollment analysis and the assessments, and then how they're going to use that information moving forward at our October committee of the whole meeting.
Are they also, I'm sure they are, property across from the primary school? That's
Yes.
included in this?
Yes, correct.
Do they know what we can and cannot do? And
They do.
do
They have our purchase agreement, maps of that like the land that we own. They have all of that information at this point in
purchasing
time.
agreement and what else?
The map that outlines like exactly where the land is.
Do they know, based on Act 1, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I actually, Mr. Albertson and I we met with them prior to the full-blown meeting today to speak specifically about athletic upgrades. And I was specifically asked if we knew if there was any movement for the zoning across the street. And I said no. And we would think that, at this point in time, that right now, as it stands right now, building a building across there, a school, is off the table as of right now. That could change, but we're not really holding our breath in terms of that process, quite
Records
frankly.
of our prior superintendent
So,
contacting Senator Gordner's office.
Correct.
Am I right or wrong?
yes, there are.
Correct.
There
And
are.
we were led to not do that without them actually
Pretty,
saying no.
pretty clearly explicitly
Very
stated
clearly,
in
yes.
writing, yes. So Alloy 5 is aware of that. Some of the questions that we have that are short of an actual building across the street would be things like dugouts, bathrooms, and a field house. Because if you're going to use it for any type of athletic complex, you need to be able to have those types of things and lights.
We know if we can or cannot do that.
That we do not know, because that is not specifically stated. There is some language in some of those records that indicates that those things could be considered, because the whole zoning, the regulations that they lifted were in regards to what they deemed permanent structures. So we have some work to do to get clarification on things like dugouts and bathrooms and so forth.
I will try not to be too long-winded with this. Long-range planning committee, current head. all that documentation that defines what we can and can't do, we should have. Because we have a company we're paying for to come in and do an assessment. Have that. This land was purchased, I believe, in 2018. Durrell was on the board, I was on the board. I wasn't here in 2020 when the former superintendent. But those emails are here, we have them. It was purchased initially because of not having enough field space. It started with the cross not being able to get on the field and some of the restrictions that they had, and then there were issues high-end varsity country both being there. It just got, and we were also looking at outside land, and the reason I thought of it was because of the softball team to Echo. That was exactly why we started the discussions. We felt we didn't have the space, and we were looking at too much outside. House our own teams. But it's 2024, it's 6 years later. I mean, we should have a definition, a defined ability to use that space for something. We should know what we can and can't do. I'm going to suggest that we enlist someone, probably our solicitor, find all that and give us something concrete in terms of what our restrictions. It's a ripple effect. And have an architect already started without knowing that. Give us options if they don't know what we can use. It was initially just for fields. That was what we were looking at. Practice fields, because there were restrictions. Nothing. Obviously no buildings. State restrictions, and I don't know what the boroughs. Obviously they're going to have some type of when you do a project on their land. Some of this is in the township too. Right?
Correct.
Correct.
So this gets a little bit complex. You have Wawa involved in it. I think that we really need to borrow and get to our architect and to us and to Durrell.
So I've spoke with the solicitor from the borough, just in casual conversation, because I've seen him out around town.
Right.
And the general thought so far is that we are to use it for athletic facilities only, including bathrooms, field houses, dugouts, things of that nature. I also have made contact with Senator Schleichel's office,
Yeah, good.
and I needed to do some research to get a date, a purchase date, which you just gave me. So I can contact them, and they can dig the information up then from the actual, when it was transferred.
That was Act 130, right? It was called. It was under 130.
I can get you all
Basically,
that
had that.
paperwork too.
Anyway, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I can make contact with him, give him the date, because it'd be easier for him to research it that way. And then they can get us all the information with what was on it then, what changed from Commonwealth to borough. And so at least we know that part of it. Because again, and I think I've expressed this to you in conversation, you know, my biggest fear is we put a shovel in the ground, start doing stuff, and then get, whoa, whoa, whoa.
That's,
You can't do that.
yeah.
After we were under the impression we could.
Yeah, and I just think that anything we can do. See, I know in this after it was over, we don't want that. We don't want to get into battles with the borough and battles with the township and battles with Wawa if we can avoid it.
And like I said, my understanding at this point is, from what I've been told so far, is that the athletic facility kind of umbrella fits the lights, the dugouts, the field houses, as long as it's not a school, basically, is what it boils down to.
Yeah. No, I just think that the work, upfront work being done now could prevent us.
It's going to save us a lot in the
crisis
future.
Later.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay, thank you.
And the next slide just indicates the overall timeline that I've shared before. So again, we're looking at that just assessment spot in October. No proposals yet, just an assessment of where we're at. And then on the next slide, you'll see the Wawa update today is much more brief than last time. Essentially just the vote for the intersection options did not take place in August. I have communicated with Brindy that if there are Wawa decisions that are being made, please let us know. We'll always make sure that we have representation. and a letter on behalf of the board was submitted that I shared with all of you to Borough Council prior to their August meeting, indicating the preference for option 1 in terms of the intersection. There's not really Wawa updates other than that at this point. That then just takes us to policy updates. So just wanted to share that you will see this month some first reads. So when we're updating policy, for those of you that are new and haven't had that experience yet, you get a month to just kind of read, and then the final vote comes in the second month. So for us, that would be a first read in September and then approval in October. So the federal government did make changes to Title IX, and PSBA is recommending the following policies have some changes to them based on the changes to the federal law. Mrs. Faust has put together a packet for you so you could start to look at exactly how what those recommended changes look like. Those are not Danville specific. Those are they'll become Danville policy, but those are just straight from PSBA's guidelines for what our policy should look like there. One additional policy update is that the governor did just pass the legislation that came through about having a moment of silence on 9/11 as something that schools should be doing moving forward, and PSBA is recommending that that be added to the policy that's currently opening exercises and flag displays, to make that policy opening exercises, moment of silence, and flag displays. So all of those policies you will have to review electronically as well, but Mrs. Faust has them in a packet in your folders for you. And then finally, personnel items that you'll see this month in terms of positions. So we do have an RN candidate to recommend next week. We had 2 candidates apply for that job and had a selection committee that you see listed there. We will be recommending a director of mental health. We had 2 certified candidates for that position and interviewed both of those people, and that was our selection committee. And thank you to Dr. Faulkner for lending his expertise in that field and joining us as well. We have a special education teacher we'll be recommending, and we had candidates go through first round, and then they just went through a second round of teaching sample interviews with that selection committee. And then we have, we'll hope to have a health and PE candidate to recommend. We did start with 9 candidates, and we had 5 interviews, and we'll be inviting some candidates back for second round interviews tomorrow. And that was our selection committee for health and PE.
The service substitute teachers here,
Yes.
if they apply for a position, do they automatically get an interview?
If they met the qualifications, I would imagine so.
What qualifications would there be that would be different?
No, I'm just like, as long as they were certified in that area or those kind of things. If there's,
How about if somebody directing a club or an activity and they apply?
I certainly think we try to review applications. I've shared our hiring practices. If someone's done that successfully, I think that they more than likely would. I think the specific instance you're referring to, we had interviewed that person in a different role. Okay.
I ask as a general question.
I'm sorry.
Appreciate it if you not do that.
I would say more than likely, if they've been successful in coaching or leading a club for us, we would take that into serious consideration. We create a rubric for every opening that we have, so whether we can review candidates with that rubric.
Thank you.
So one of the only questions I have is I'm looking down through the list on the committees that were involved in each interview. And I'm going through an assumption process in my mind, and I'm seeing that there is possibly a lead in that department, and everyone except for health and PE. Would there be a reason why?
The lead in that department is the person that is leaving us and did help screen interviews, but was in the classroom during that first round of interviews. So it's just a unique position where that lead is the one that's taking a position close to where she lives.
Okay.
Who will be responsible for checking records of all applicants as well as anyone?
Like checking their clearances and those kind of things. Jonathan Adams would do that for us in HR.
Else on this topic? So 10-1, board concerns and for next agenda meeting. There are two things I just wanted to briefly address. So number one, Dr. Brookhart, for agenda item 4.1 CMAVTS, you brought up the suggestion that we come up with a set policy of what we wanted to communicate back. I'm just circling back to you to look for suggestions on how you would like to come up with that.
I missed the first part of that.
I'm just circling back to you. You suggested that we come up with a policy in response to things like the field house and other things that we wanted to communicate.
Yeah, I just think that we should take a position here. We would fund something like that at the VOTEC or not.
Okay. So I'm asking, how would you like to come up with that? Would you like me to cycle it back to the members of the committee and have them come up with something for the general board? Would you like it to be a general board discussion? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I'm just curious of what our position would be if VOTEC has an issue, because we're sending Mr. Garman there. Are we sending?
Mr. Vugnitz was the other one.
We have an
This
open
is the other
slot.
one, okay, and he should have an idea how we feel about these things. We can participate in the discussion
Sure.
when we get there, so that way, and there's nothing going this way. Here's what prompted it.
Sure.
It sounds like because some districts don't want to fund the field house repair there, they're going to have to send the kids from from the VOTEC to Central Columbia. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah,
my
those
question
are a big
is,
thing with wrestling.
if that happened here, would we allow that to happen to the kids that go to school in Danville and then send our kids? There, because they're still Danville kids. That's why I brought it up.
Okay.
I think that is a discussion we should have so that we can tell them Danville's position. That's why I brought it up. Not a policy, just a position. I'm curious how other people feel about it. What was it, Tyler, 90,000?
Yeah, yeah, there was a, I mean, a lot of the other districts were kind of like me, in the same boat, like, just kind of sat there and listened and bring it back to you guys. I know there were one or two that were like, absolutely not. Like, why would you ask us for that money? Every nickel in our budget's spent, like, we don't, So there was a lot, like, I wasn't the only one sitting there that was like in awe, like, I don't know what to say, but there was definitely two or three sides of feelings on it, so.
Mr. Garman, when do you know the date when that meeting, the topic of that came up?
Right now.
Because I think there's also an interesting course here that we have to examine, like.
Yeah, they kind of, because they didn't have a meeting in July, so.
So this is part of what I was trying to get a feel for, because it seems like oftentimes some of these things are sprung, that there's no way for us to know that they were coming before. And so to have that discussion before we send the representative, sounds like a lot of the times what we're gonna end up doing is we're gonna get the information brought back, and then we're gonna develop a stance as a group. And I was just trying to imagine how you would want to handle it differently, to make sure that if we were going to do that, we were going to handle it differently. But my impression sort of felt like, the impression I always got was that his main job is to bring stuff back to us.
Right.
For us to then have the discussion if need be.
Yep.
And then send him back as a representative to represent us.
Yeah, I know I didn't, what would have been the June meeting? There was nothing brought up of the sewer line, but I know the June meeting, there was discussion, not discussion of as a whole, like, for the field house, but it was brought up that there was something
There was a problem.
wrong with the field house. And I don't think it was literally like, I think it came up as kids were upstairs in their field house and kids were downstairs, and there was stuff falling from the ceiling on the kids downstairs. So, like, it wasn't like
Right.
I don't think it was something that was like they did like an inspection and found it. Like, it was something that was like kind of sprung on
And
them.
then
They had no idea.
and then no meeting in July, and
Yeah,
then in August
yeah,
they're saying,
yeah,
here are our
yeah,
options.
we have to fix this. Yeah,
So this specific thing may just be a breakdown because of the fact that there wasn't a meeting there for us to have the discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just trying to get a feel whether there has to be something different in the process when we send people in order to fulfill your needs.
And they,
or whether that's-
like I said, when they talked about it, like they weren't like I said, they gave 3 options, and they had already looked into loan option, had all that information, you know, so they weren't like, hey, we need to fix this, like, you know, the districts are going to pay for it. They just kind of brought it to the attention of this could be a possibility.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brookhart, I think part of the concern is it puts our representative to the JOC in an awful position.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're expected to vote at a meeting on something that you haven't had the information or literally the time
Hey, I get
to
a $5
take back to the
I get a
local
$5
board.
dinner out of it. It's okay.
But
It's all worth
to be
it.
able to make, I mean, honestly, to be able to make an educated vote as a member of the JOC is impossible without the timely information to share with the entire board that you're representing.
Right.
So this may be something we have to think about how we want our members to actively respond when there's a situation. That may be what we have to do. Because if they had tried to force him to vote on the district's funding, I mean, it's the same thing as the single head of the academic committee making a change in purpose.
Yeah,
of
and they-
sending people. And
they-
I think that's part of your point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and this may not be the case where they just did something and told us later. If
Right.
it's an emergency and they didn't have any. weren't
Yeah,
sure
and he-
they had to do it.
They
Sure.
did talk about reaching, like if it did go district funding way,
Yeah.
like they would present it to us like in a manner, you know what I mean? So we could discuss it, like it wouldn't just be like,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, me going up there and voting on it, like
No, I'm just trying to make sure that we're adequately addressing
Yeah,
the concerns
yeah.
that were brought up, and I wanted to make sure that we had an understanding of why this happened, and if it was something that we had done wrong, that there
Yeah.
was some process that we could put in place.
I guess my position is the kids at the vote tech are our kids, just like our kids here.
Right, right.
And we should philosophically and fiscally treat them the same way that we would treat them here. And that's the mindset we could go into. The things about VOTEC I don't like. I've talked about it before. I'm not doing this to be a VOTEC advocate, but I am an advocate for the Danville kids.
Makes
I think
sense.
that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
And I'm saying if we had that situation here, fund it and address it.
But we also always have to make sure that we feel like they're honestly representing what the need is and spending our money responsibly.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the flip side, right? Because my first instinct is to say to you, okay, then let's just take the policy where anytime they need something from us that affects our kids, we say yes. But that seems like a terrible idea when I think about that.
There's nothing I like more than to have an independent analysis.
Sure.
But, right, we're dealing with something in real time.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like the process is currently working, and that if it had been changed slightly, or if there had been
Yeah.
one more additional.
And I
meeting, we
know,
might have had more
I know,
additional-
I know they had architects come in and look at the field house, and they were basically like, they gave them the proposition of like, you're not using it. Like nobody walks in here until something's done. So I'm sure if there's, you know, what I mean, any question to it, I'm pretty sure they have a paper trail of, yeah, I mean, what they need to do, what needs to happen, you know, everything like that.
I mean, I don't mean to imply that they're.
Oh no, I'm
But we are stewards
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
budget, right? And we
Yeah.
have to make sure that
Yep.
we're being responsible when it comes to these things. The second thing is, so the election of the new member. I sent out a process to everyone. We have 2 applicants. What I'm going to suggest is a few minor modifications, which I'll send out because there's only 2 applicants to sort of streamline things. And that I would also suggest probably we just end up voting on both instead of doing a nomination process, which I will rewrite into the actual outline that I had. So when you get an email from me tomorrow or the next day, please take a look at it and send me back feedback of changes you'd like to see made. It's very similar, I essentially used a similar process the last time. There is, and Dr. Brookhart, I'm looking at you specifically, there's the time in there for you to ask individual questions, okay? Because one of the concerns last time is that we felt that some of the parameters were a little too strict. We wanted the ability, and last cycle we did ask individual questions. It is in there. So if you have specific things that you want to ask, either about the applications themselves or in response to whatever answer they give us, you will have that opportunity. And I think no one really had a big issue with the process that I just sent out, but I think just because we only have 2 applicants, I want to make sure everyone gets the original process was that when we had like 10, 15 applicants, we can't spend all day voting on every single, but 2 people, we can vote on 2. That's not going to take forever for us to figure it out. So I will write that process out to make sure everyone's okay with it. Any feedback or things to say? Okay, I'll resend it to you, but give me a day or 2 to relook at it and go through it, okay? And seriously, if there's anything anyone wants to do differently, I'll accommodate it, as long as there's not a general objection. So, okay? Yes, sir.
Are we the board yet? Go ahead, I'll let you finish.
No, no, that's all I got.
Okay. One more thing I want to bring up. First of all, I love having a world-class hospital. I love all the mental health stuff that we're doing. I think it's wonderful. I think what we're doing for our kids, and I personally wouldn't have it any other way. But there just seem to be some inherent contradictions in some of the things happening right now in what we're hearing. Because I do pick up the daily item in the Press Enterprise pretty regularly, and they really building at $880 million.
They 100%
Telling
are.
us they don't have any money and that they can't help us with things like mental health, directors of mental health, and physicians, and all the supports that we need. I mean, we're not stupid people. I mean, we can figure it out.
They
You're not
got
broke. You got billions of dollars in assets.
well, they got a fairly large infusion from the overarching entity that Geisinger's
Great.
part of in order to do the
Well,
expansion.
I can tell you where they can put some of it.
Yeah,
Because
I
there is an ongoing, it's not ongoing, it was settled. There was a case in Pottstown, which the press, I know, reported on, where the Pottstown School District, I believe it was, went and took the Pottstown Hospital to court for not being in compliance with nonprofit, their nonprofit status. There's about 5 tests, and they were not compliant with 3 of them, I believe it was. And the school district won, and it's now an appeal. And that wasn't the only case of that type. I think there were 2 others as well, and the nonprofits lost. And I'm not bashing the hospital. There's a lot of great people there, obviously. There's fantastic doctors. I'm thrilled that they're there. But we all are supposed to be paying our fair share. And I think it's time to determine whether they are or they're not, because it certainly appears that they're not. And if we need to enlist our solicitor to see what position we can take with that, to put ourselves in that discussion as it goes forward, I think it may be time to do that. That's just my opinion. I'm only one board member. There's 8 other ones here. And I know a couple of you may not want to get too deeply involved in this, and I understand why. But I'm kind of curious how you feel. If you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. But I felt it was time.
We have some sort of agreement with them, correct?
We do, however.
Yeah, we have the community assistance, the CAP program, where in lieu of some of their parcels of tax assessed property, they pay us the agreed upon rate, which is around $1.1 million a year.
And we may find that that's sufficient based on a regular property tax assessment, even if this case finds that they are a for-profit hospital. I kind of doubt it. But that agreement is something that can be revisited. Any agreement can be revisited if both sides agree to come to the table and talk about it. And I would think that the court case is going to supersede it, because the district came to that agreement with the belief that this is a nonprofit acting in compliance with nonprofit requirements, which the courts have now ruled that they did not. Not this one, but the other nonprofit hospitals. So that's my position, and I'm not an attorney, but I can read and count.
I would be curious to know what our council's thought on whether or not they.
Well, we know that there are 3 that it's been ruled have not, and I know at least 2 things that I read it, and I'm not going to say what they are because it gets specific about people. One of them has to do with compensation packages for top executives, and give back to communities. But Pottstown already lost. I don't know what the other 2 are. I know Geisinger has an enormous now, and I know they profit status nationally. Kind of curious how that all done. All I know is I'm sitting on the Danville School Board, And I know that we have something over here that's putting 880 million facility or addition, and they've been telling us they're broke for the last couple of years.
Wish I was broke.
Their financial records are out on the internet. You can look and see exactly what they have. It's not hard to find. So that's my position.
So how would you like to see this move forward? Once again, to go back to sort of the.
I'd ask,
committee.
just from me, and then everybody else can talk, I'd just
Sure.
like to hear from Carl, or
Okay.
somebody from his office, exactly where the district stands
There-
and what it would mean for us to hook on to that if we wanted to do that.
There has been contact made with Carl Beard regarding that particular case and some recent developments that we will be sharing publicly in future meetings.
Okay.
So
There have been years when I know the press has reported profits,
As recent as today.
a couple $100 million.
Forward to hearing it.
All right, that's all I had to say.
Hopefully it's positive.
One thing
think
quick while
so.
we're talking about money. I know, Mr. Moser, I talked to you, and I told you it wasn't my idea. It actually came from Mr. Brookhart. Were you able to get in contact with our bond people to see if they could give us an update?
I do have a number that would have been updated. It was updated last in June. I have asked for that number to be updated because July 1 it would actually get updated again. I have not received an answer on that yet, but I have sent that message out.
Again, just for curiosity's sake, I
Sure.
want to know where we stand financially.
What our borrowing capacity would be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
My turn.
Yeah, of course.
As far as like the across the road and all the stuff that's going on with that, what like confirmation do we have of who owns and who's responsible for State Hospital Drive?
Who owns
Yeah.
State Hospital Drive?
Yeah.
That would be the borough.
That would be the borough. Yeah, I believe that's the
Yeah,
borough.
because the borough supervisor informed me that the state hospital owns it.
State
and they're-
Hospital,
And they're
owns.
not responsible for it until Wall Street. So,
all the way
So
down
the-
to 11.
So the
Yeah.
borough is responsible from Wall Street going to the state
no,
hospital?
they pick up at the
Wall
borough
Street.
at Wall Street. Like they come to Wall Street to State Hospital Drive. Like, like when they plow and everything like that.
They
like they'll
stop
plow
at Wall Street.
to State Hospital Drive and don't do State
But then
Hospital
at
Drive.
borough council meetings, they're talking about how there's a plan to expand State Hospital Drive.
My only concern is even if nothing happens across the road for 30 years, that if we put stuff across the road, that
Yeah.
obviously something is going to have to be done with that. And as of now, probably 90% of the traffic on that road is our traffic anyway. So, get to the bottom of what can be done with it, who,
Whose
don't want to put fields
responsibility it
across.
is.
Yeah, I don't want
Yeah.
to put fields across the road and there be, 80 or 90 cars that park over there, and you have a 2-lane road to come in and out for. And the buses are coming. They have a softball game. It'll be an issue. I think before Wawa's ever an issue. So
So you were told all the way down to
yeah,
Route
all
11.
all the state
The
start of
entire State
Hospital
Hospital
Drive
Drive.
Entire
to-
road
yes,
to Route 11.
Yes, is the state hospital's responsibility. That's what I was told.
We can certainly work on a
Yes, we can.
clear-cut answer on that.
Yeah.
That's the first that we've heard that.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else?
Just real quickly, we have the tennis court thing here. What's our plan for maintaining the courts at the middle school until the resurfacing is done? Right now, it looks like we're spraying weeds. I mean, really, that's what it is, right? So what's the plan? Are we allowing people to play on them? I'm not down there that much.
As of right now, we are allowing people access to the courts. We can certainly work on getting the weeds actually pulled. Beyond that, it would be making sure they're swept, but I mean, we wouldn't want to go into any sort of resurfacing on our own.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Public comment. Guess how only the press is here. I guess that's adjournment. Thank you, guys. We will adjourn to executive session. briefly.